Thank you so much, President Dunlap, for that lovely introduction. I am just delighted and feel so honored to be here to help you celebrate the start of this academic year and, of course, to help kick off the exciting new Santee Cooper Speaker Series. What better setting could there be to talk about inventing our sustainable future than right here, right now? You know, often when I talk about the future, I invoke that well-worn opening line from A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, the worst of times. But it wasn't until just recently that I went back and rediscovered the rest of that opening paragraph, which I hate to admit at one of the best liberal arts colleges in the country. So a number of you may know what follows. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. Which kind of reminds me of the vertigo that I get listening to the news these days, depending on what channel you're listening to. But it also reminded me that it is sometimes so important to stand back and get a large picture view of sustainability, not only because of the cacophony of noise and different views that we have coming at us, but because our everyday lives are just so consuming. And what gives me pleasure in doing that here with you today is because of the special role that colleges and universities play. You know, certainly because you are training the next generation and are the next generation, because you are creating knowledge that we need, and because campuses are living laboratories for translating the theory of sustainability into actual results, like the Environmental Studies Center that I'm so excited about seeing this afternoon. But being here at Wofford adds yet one more element, because I think as we enter this really particularly critical decade, it is not so much the physical science that is so critical, although it is important, or even the technologies that are going to enable that sustainable future. I do believe strongly that the most critical thing in this next decade is the human interface with science and technology, what I sometimes call the soft side of technology, that lies squarely in the domain of so much of the curricula covered at universities like this, a theme that I'll return to from time to time. So let's get started. First, with the worst of times, the challenges that we're facing. You know, sometimes I think the best way to get a view of this is to actually stand back and see the Earth as few others have, and that's people that literally have gone to outer space. And I'm always intrigued with how so many that have training in engineering or physics wax poetic once they leave the gravity of the Earth. I was thinking of Lauren Acton, the solar physicist, who said this: "Looking outward to the blackness of space, sprinkled with the glory of a universe of lights, I saw no majesty, but no welcome. Below was a welcoming planet. There contained in the thin, moving, incredibly fragile shell of the biosphere is everything that is dear to you. That's where life is." Or another, Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth person to walk on the moon, pilot, engineer, who also had an emotional reaction in space, exuding adjectives left and right. Listen to this. "Suddenly, from behind the rim of the moon, in long, slow motion, moments of immense majesty, there emerges a sparkling blue and white jewel, a light, delicate sky blue sphere, laced with slowly swirling veils of white, rising gradually like a small pearl in a thick sea of black mystery. It takes more than a moment to fully realize this is Earth, it's home." And then later on, very succinctly, "My view of our planet was a glimpse of divinity." So crashing back to Earth now, you know, it's fair to ask, how are we doing on this sparkling, divine pearl of life called Earth? And you know, we actually got an answer to that broad question 4 or 5 years ago from the single largest scientific project involving 1,400 scientists from 95 countries called the Millennium Assessment. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are familiar with that? A number of you. It was important for a number of reasons. One is it was the first inventory of the health of our global ecosystems, from coral reefs and aquifers to agricultural systems to the whole climate system. But even more than that, they did something so important, and that was to frame the results in terms of the services that ecosystems provide. Services that we often take for granted, let alone price in the market, right? And a good example, is a classic example, is a number of years ago when the city of New York compared the costs of restoring an upland watershed to provide filtered clean water or building a new treatment plant, which was much more costly. So in 2005, those 1,370 scientists gave us an answer. And what they said is 2/3 of the ecosystems that make life on Earth what it is are in serious decline. A few irreversible, some on the tipping point. In short, what we're seeing is absolute limits on the resources at the same time that the pressure is even increasing through consumption, through population growth, through the rising economies of Asia. And you know, we can see that playing out in research that's been done even since the Millennium Assessment. I was thinking of the major study that was done of coral reefs last year that found that 2/3 of them are at the tipping point. We've already lost a good 40% of them. Coral reefs, so important because they are the centers of the greatest biodiversity on Earth, providing home and habitat for billions of fish that we depend on. Also protecting the shore from storm surges, which will increase and are through climate change. Or water. You know, 30 states already are engaged in legal matters over declining water supplies. And then you think of Asia, 1.5 billion people dependent on the fresh water contained in what is called the third largest ice sheet in the world, the Tibetan Plateau. Mountain glaciers that are melting much faster than we've seen in many, many, many thousands of years. Well, the list goes on. But you know, my point is not to drive you out of the auditorium in despair, but to actually make this point and to reemphasize it again and again. The challenge at hand is not the physical scientific data that we need. We know enough to take action. The challenge is how society is responding to that data. I think of a recent Gallup poll on climate change. You know, in 1997, registered Democrats and Republicans voted fairly evenly in this poll as to whether or not global warming was occurring and if it was occurring already, about 47% for each. 11 years later, a gap of 35% had opened up. And in the intervening years, we received the 2 reports of the IPCC reports, the Authority on Climate Change. We received the National Academy of Science study done for President Bush and many other studies. So why is this? The answer is not more physical data. The answer lies in the realm of social sciences, the political science, sociology, communications, journalism, history, ethics, religion, philosophy, all those realms that help us as a society to receive and process and critically think through complex and rigorous science. So why invent a sustainable future? For one, because we can't sustain one that is based on a fallacy of unlimited resources, and 2, because bumping up against those limits is unleashing incredible waves of innovation. The clouds are lifting. So let's move in to that exciting world of creating that future, starting with energy.